Now, the culture here, which is very unlike me, because in many ways I don't think like that. I'm very un-Nigerian in many ways. But the culture here is this, that the minute you lose, you keep quiet. You say nothing, you do nothing, and the master, the almighty president or government has its way. No, I won't do that. I would continue to say what I feel needs to be said. I'll continue to criticize if I feel it's necessary. I'll continue to speak out. That's what leaders are meant to do. And I'm prepared to pay the price, whether it is life, my life being taken, whether it is being persecuted by the government, or whether it's being incarcerated. I'm prepared to pay any price for my country because the truth must stand. Dissent should be a blessing in a democratic setting.
Do you still believe in Nigeria?
That's a very good question, because when you look at what's happening in this country, and by the way, let me say that during the course of the election, I said a lot of things, if you remember, and people, we interviewed a couple of times, and literally everything that I said would happen if the other side won is happening today. And it touches on the question you just asked, do we really have a country? Where you have a situation where it's very, very clear that there's an ethnic and religious agenda playing out in this country. Yes, nobody wants to say it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm being persecuted, because I say these things. There's an ethnic and religious agenda unfolding in this country. And that then, it then raises questions about whether or not we can continue as one country if you choose that course. Our message was that I'm talking about the Jonathan message and the PDP message as it then was that, look, we mustn't play ethnic and religious politics. We must have a modern Nigerian nation state, a secular state, where religion and ethnicity has no place. The other side didn't play that game, and they didn't hide it. Their party was more or less like the Muslim.
You think that is playing out now?
But do I think? It's very, very obvious. Now, it's very obvious. Now, quite apart from...
You want to be specific?
I'll be very specific. Look at the appointments in the government. Look at what is happening. Everything down basically to one thing. If you want to get anything in this government, or you want to be anybody in this government, you have to be a core northern Muslim. That's just the truth. Except for a few exceptions here and there. Everybody has been marginalized in this country. That is the plain truth. I am sure even those in the South, the Southwest that supported the APC, are regretting it deeply now. They won't say it publicly, but that is the reality of the situation. And quite apart from what the government...
Is it the reality?
No. It's the facts speak. Perception are not based on facts. The facts are there. But let me just, move away from that slightly by telling you what I think is more serious than that. I don't want to talk about the failings of the government because they're self-evident. And if Nigerians can't see that by now, then I leave everything to God, and maybe they'll see it in a few years when the consequences of that failure unfold, which again touch on concern on the unity of the country. But quite apart from that, I think a more serious problem is this. The religious divide that we have in this country, the growing confidence of what I call the Islamist tendency in this country, that is, those that are Muslim fanatics, and the majority of Muslims do not fall into that category, I have to say this. But look at what is going on in this country. Document the facts. Just the other day, a 73-year-old woman was beheaded in Kanu simply because she asked people not to wash their feet before prayers in front of her house. She was a grandmother. She was dragged out and beheaded by the fanatic crowd, and they rejoiced in what they did. A few days later, there was a redeemed pastor, a woman, that was preaching in Kubwa in Abuja. And again, she was told that she's not meant to do morning cry and evangelize in the morning. And she was hacked to pieces by a fanatical Muslim mob. A few days later, in Niger State, a Catholic church was burnt down and worshippers attacked. This was last Friday, simply because they happened to be worshipping on Friday. And the Muslim fanatics on that day said that you can't worship on a Friday because that's the Muslim holy day. And I could go on and on. These are the sort of things that are happening now. And these people are becoming more emboldened simply because they are seeing the body language and the signs of the federal government, and they're tolerating these things. I don't need to talk to you. I've written more than anyone else in this country about the activities of the Fulani militants, that is the Fulani herdsmen, who incidentally happen to be, according to the Global Terror Network, the fourth most deadly terrorist organization in the world. Their activities in the South and the Middle Belt, are there for everybody to see. We could go on and on and on. And these are the tensions. And show, let me also say this, to bring it a little bit closer to the issues that I have faced in last week. Some of the things I saw when I was in detention at the EFCC, again, reinforces that point that we really do have a problem in this country now. Because if you remember, the Nigerian military between 1966 up until 1999 was essentially a tool of oppression in the hands of the core North, to suppress and also to ensure the interests of the core North were protected and to suppress the rest of the country. That is what the EFCC has become today. Let me give you a few examples, okay? And this is going to surprise you, but it needs to be there. And by the way, the majority of EFCC officers and people that work there are very good people. So this is not an attack on the institution. This is not an attack on any individual in the institution, but these are some of the things that have happened, which I think they need to look at themselves. And I can say this because I'm a public figure. Others can't speak, I can speak. Let me give you a few examples. One of the things that, the only time in the 67 days that I was in detention that I almost shed tears, in fact, I shed a tear or two, the only time was in the middle of the night at 1:30 when I was in my cell 13, in Lagos, at the EFCC detention center in Okoti Airport, cell 13. And 1:30 in the morning. And I could hear on the other side, because there were a whole set of cells on the other side, about 10 of them, and it's a section and it's cut off from the rest. They were praying. They were doing an all-night Christian prayer. And, they were Pentecostals, they were praying in tongues, singing to God. And most of these people have been there for months. They have nothing and nobody but God, all right? And all of a sudden, I heard the jail door opening on their section, and a whole load of EFCC officials stormed the place and said, "Stop that nonsense! No, shut up! Hey, no, stop that! Yeah, you mustn't stop it!" Screamed at them, at the top of their voices. I know the name of the person that led the team. I just won't mention it on TV. And they stopped. They stopped, and then the officers left, and there was silence there, and I couldn't believe it. So I asked my cellmate, a young man by the name of Emmanuel, that what happened just now? He said, "Well, they've stopped them from praying." I said, "But why?" He said he didn't. I said, "Well, I won't. Let me just be sure." So I got up from my cell. I went to the outer door, perimeter, to our own outer door, which was also locked, and I signaled for the officer to come. And he came to me and I said, "I was told you just stopped them from praying. Is that correct?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, I wanted to hear from you. I didn't want to hear it from a third party, just to be sure." I said, "May I ask why?" He said, "Well, it's too loud." I said, "Why didn't you tell them to reduce their voices?" He said, "No, they just have to stop." So I said, "Well, is that the policy of the EFCC?" He said, "Yes, that is our policy, that they may be plotting an escape." I said, "Escape by praying?" He said, "Yes, so we will not allow it." I said, "Okay, fine." I said, "Well, you know that when I leave this place, I'm going to make an issue of this because it pains me that people cannot pray even when they're in custody." He said, "Yes, you can do what you like." And I told him this. I said, "Look, you're very lucky that it wasn't on my section that these prayers were being conducted because I happen to be a believer and a Pentecostal Christian." I said, "Because if you had come and said we should stop praying in my section, if everybody else stopped, I would have prayed louder." I said, "That's the first thing. The second thing is that had it been that these people were Muslims that were praying, would you have done the same thing?" He said, "Oh God, don't ask me that kind of question." And he stormed. This is a boy that's half my age, okay? And he stormed off. So that shows you a little bit of the way. Now, every day, I have to add to that, every day there is a fellowship in that same place between 7 and 8. But on occasions, the officers come there and say, no prayers are allowed, no fellowship today, and so on and so forth. That never happens to the other side. That's number one. Number two, and this is also very interesting, both in Lagos and Abuja, I was locked up in both places. You'd be surprised to hear that almost 7 times, because I did the statistics, I did the numbers with others, we counted it. There are 7 times more Christians that are detained in both Lagos and Abuja than there are Muslim detainees. Because when everybody gathers to pray, you see the numbers. That is also very interesting. Is it coincidence? Well, I don't know. Contrived or coincidence? I don't know. Thirdly, and most importantly, you'll be surprised to hear this, and I would challenge you to do the research, that anybody that is from the core North that is detained by the EFCC, most of them, virtually all of them, are released after 2, at the most 3 days. 2 or 3 days. But 98% of the people that are detained for more than 3 days and indefinitely for weeks, months, or whatever, all happen to be from the South and the Middle Belt. That is extraordinary. Now, to couple that, so 98% of detainees long-term detainees that are detained for more than 2 or 3 days are from the south and the middle belt. Whereas core northerners, they hardly ever get detained for longer than that, except for a few exceptions. Now, to couple that, 98% of the decision-making processes, those at the top of that agency that control everything, are from the core north, that is the northwest and the northeast. And the underlings are from the south and the middle belt. So it's ridiculous. So you see what's going on here. Now, I'm not attacking anybody. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not diminishing anybody. I'm not a tribalist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a religious bigot. But I'm saying that I would urge the EFCC itself to begin to look at these things, to try to make it a little bit more federal, to be more sensitive to the fact that, it's not just, Southerners or Middle Belters or Christians that are worthy of being detained indefinitely. I mean, they don't commit more crimes than anybody else.
I saw something online. Were you ever attacked when you were in custody of the EFCC?
Well, I was assaulted. On a particular occasion by what they call a cell guard, somebody that's a school certificate holder. I believe his name was Suleiman Kabiru or something like that. I was assaulted by him, and the matter, in fairness to the FCC, is being investigated by them. They interviewed him. They got all the facts. There were witnesses there. The details of it, I don't really want us to...
What sort of assault is this?
Well, it's a physical, verbal assault and a physical assault, and let me put it like this, he put his hands on my body. And this boy is almost a quarter of my age. I wouldn't employ him as my gatesman, frankly. So, but let me also say that it's under investigation, or the boy has been disciplined, and I have the assurances from the highest level of the FCC that that sort of thing would never happen to me again. It happened on one occasion. The overwhelming majority of EFCC officers, those that detain at the Lagos and Abuja, and those that lead the organization, and those that investigate the cases, are very, very civil, polite people. They're trained to be like that. So I have no objection. They were good to me in many ways, but if you look at what has happened to so many other people, and that are still there up until today, the fact that some cannot take phone calls are not allowed, some cannot have food from their families, some cannot do, it's dehumanizing, and the conditions are absolutely dehumanizing. And this is something that I think we need to look at. The Constitution guarantees that we're innocent until proven guilty. So when you treat a man that is innocent, that has not been convicted by a court, like an animal, and you don't let him have the basics that he needs for life, then it becomes a problem. Well, prison, nobody wants to go to, EFCC custody is even though some of the officers are very nice and they try their best, it's dehumanizing. It's a very, very difficult thing, especially if it's over a long period of time and people are there, they're like prisoners of Zenda. And, it's a very sad thing, Some haven't even seen their families for a very, very long time, because everybody runs away when you're in the FCC, because nobody wants to come to see you. Everybody's scared of the FCC. The prison custody is a much better place. It sounds ridiculous. Nobody wants to go to prison, but the prison officials, their training is different. Theirs is to rehabilitate, and theirs is to show a little bit of compassion and decency towards the inmates. As surprising as it might seem, because Nigerians are quite brutal in many ways, but the prison officials in this country are very, very professional. They do their job properly. They take care of the inmates as best as they can. And they don't intimidate, they don't threaten, they don't beat, they don't attack, and they don't insult. And that needs to be commended and encouraged. That doesn't mean prison is a nice place. It's not a nice place. People suffer there. People are going through hell there. But thank God that those that run these prisons do not add to the suffering of those that are there. The contrast with the EFCC is that to be in EFCC custody for a long period of time is close to being in hell. It is a terrible experience. And I would advise anybody that, that has to go there to take a lawyer, and also to pray very, very hard that they get bail and they get out as quickly as possible, or they get to court, because the courts actually are where you can get salvation. Once you're in court, things become very different and you're not in their power anymore. I repeat, I do not have anything against any individual in the EFCC. It's an institutional problem.